Last year, KCI launched a call for input for guidelines and policy frameworks to promote just transition of the workforce and the creation of decent work and quality jobs, to which you responded, you meaning climate strategies, responded by submitting your country-specific works, some even sector-specific, that provide policy recommendations on how these countries can achieve a just transition. Based on these works, tell us the state of play of countries in the undertaking of the transition. Have any countries established a clear plan, strategy, guidelines, or framework to guide them in their transition in order to do it in a just manner that addresses the impacts of the transition on the society and workforce? So the floor is yours.
Thank you for the question and for the invitation to join this panel. And I think you started looking into this question a little bit actually in your introduction. It looks like a very easy or straightforward question to answer, but actually it is not. And I think it links to what Jorian was saying earlier about different countries having different visions of just transition. So when we think about like actual just transition frameworks or policies that are, sorry, it's a little bit far away. When we think about actual just transition frameworks or policies that are very comprehensive, there are only a handful of countries that have actually implemented such kinds of instruments. And I could point, for example, well, Angelica from Argentina was mentioning about their example a little bit earlier. I'm sorry, from Chile was, I thought Angelica, Argentina. From Chile was talking about her example earlier. We see other countries that have similar plans. For example, in Costa Rica, we know that the just transition is really, really important. It's mentioned over 100 times in their NDCs, and they have a strong focus on skilling, reskilling, training for specifically oriented towards vulnerable populations that are not currently included in the labor markets. We know in South Africa, for example, that there is also a just transition framework. That was one of the first tasks that the Presidential Climate Change Commission has to tackle with. And we know, for example, that in the case of Colombia, the NDC included also the creation of 2 just transition frameworks, was one of them specifically for the workforce and one for energy. I haven't been able to corroborate this, but we heard from some of our sources that the one about the workforce has recently been approved. Again, this is not information that is available online, so this may be wrong, but if it's not already approved, it's very, very close to be approved. Other than that, we have seen the integration of just transitions within instruments, maybe not as a whole instrument or policy framework, but there has been now a better understanding of what just transition means. And even if you don't have just transition per se in those documents, we see pieces here and there, guidelines and principles that are introduced in other policies. And in that sense, for example, we see this within the NDCs. Again, Chile is one of these examples, but we also have, again, Colombia, Norway, the UK, Indonesia, Argentina, Kenya, Vietnam, all of which have mentioned the NDCs to some extent. And there is really good piece of work and research that is going to be coming out, produced by WBA and IISD, for example, that is going to map some of these examples. And finally, just to make things even more complicated, we know that some of the countries actually include these into other instruments. When we think about the workforce per se, we can mention examples, for example, in some of the countries that we have worked, like in Ghana, in Bangladesh, or Malawi, where we see really the focus on green jobs, on transition of the workforce, skilling, reskilling, even if they don't mention the just transition per se. So it's not a straightforward question, but what we can say is that we have seen progress in really owning the concept or the principles of the just transition in some of these countries, and really increasing the understanding of how they can benefit by introducing them into the policies.